Welcome to Your Place on the River, a podcast brought to you by Carriage Key of Woodstock, Georgia, in partnership with Chattahoochee Nature Center. Our mission is to connect people with nature. As a private nonprofit 501c3 organization, CNC thrives thanks to support of our members, the community, and listeners like you. Discover more about Chattahoochee Nature Center at chatnaturecenter.org. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the podcast. Tweet us at CNC Nature using the hashtag YPOTR. And here's your host, Melissa Carter.
Nature belongs to everyone. That's the mantra at Wilderness Inquiry. Since 1978, they have served more than 500,000 individuals from all walks of life, diverse youth, individuals with differing abilities, and others who face barriers of use of public lands and waterways. And for over 5 years, the Chattahoochee Nature Center has hosted Wilderness Inquiry in the fall for 10-day stretches, taking hundreds of thousands of people down the river. Meg Krueger is the Programs and Adventurers Director at Wilderness Inquiry. She ensures high-quality programming that grows and sustains access to outdoor recreation in communities throughout the United States. Meg, I know that in recent months, myself and several friends really got involved in the Paralympics that happened within the last few months in Paris. And I feel like this was really the first year that I saw a lot of sensitivity to those who may have some physical needs in their life. Do you find that during this time, like with the Paralympics, or anything that highlights people that, again, with special needs physically, that you see an uptick in participation with your organization, or is there no correlation at all?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think the Paralympics, the media coverage that's been brought to that, as well as just sort of some social tides changing and having more foundational language for people with disabilities, be that a physical disability or an intellectual or cognitive disability, just kind of having a greater understanding and more access to what the actual lives of people look like. That's happening on Instagram, on TikTok, and then through big events like the Paralympics for sure. I think it's creating more understanding. And for Wilderness Inquiry, we've been working with groups and individuals with disabilities for a long, long time. So what we're sort of seeing is in groups of people without disabilities understanding more about what we do and providing more support and words of encouragement around this is a really important and interesting and cool work, when that may have been overlooked a little bit more before because it felt like a population of people with disabilities was a population not integrated with the rest of society, which just isn't at all true.
Right. Well, I know that anyone who's had any kind of illness, it usually says that they feel alone because sometimes people around them don't understand them. They can't relate to them. They feel sorry for them. And it's an isolating feeling. And so I think that, with Wilderness Inquiry, someone with disabilities, you have a community because those who I know that have had chronic illnesses, once they went to organizations for their particular ailment, then they realize, wait a second, I'm not alone. There's this person, there's that person. So someone with disabilities who's not sick, it's just the fact that they may need some, different equipment in order to do the same thing that somebody else may not need the equipment for. It can be very empowering and probably helps them deal with the disability if it's something that just recently happened or if it was a sudden shift in their life.
Absolutely. I think that's right. Our approach is that we provide adaptive equipment, particularly we do a lot of paddling sports, so kayaking, canoeing. We have a North canoe, which is a 24-foot long, 10-person canoe, and that's a great medium for getting lots of people with lots of different abilities out on a waterway. In a tandem canoe, there's often somebody who has to sit in the middle, the quote duff, and doesn't paddle. In our 10-person canoe, everybody can paddle. So we have adaptive equipment to support any physical disabilities, or if someone needs a one-armed paddle instead of one of our traditional paddles, we have those too. So some of those equipment and tools is really helpful. And also, I think more importantly is a mindset. Wilderness Inquiry is based on our origin story is that the Boundary Waters, which is this protected part of of Minnesota and Canada, it's up northern Minnesota, right on the border of Canada, and it's U.S. Forest Service land and protected, non-motorized, natural wilderness. And there was legislation in the 1970s to pave and to motorize big parts of that, with kind of the idea of making it more accessible for people with disabilities or people who are older, or because it was the 70s, they also threw women in there because women need pavement and motorboats for some reason. But
at the time they wanted to get out.
Wilderness Inquiry, what we did at that time was take a group of people with and without disabilities into the wilderness and documented it and submitted that as testimony to the Minnesota legislature to say, you don't need to always adapt the environment for accommodating different needs. You need to adapt your approach. You need to adapt your communication. You need to adapt how you think about it. You don't always need to adapt the environment. And I think that's a really important part of making nature accessible. Is it's about how we think about it, not necessarily what we expect, the same way that we would expect an ADA compliant restaurant or a bathroom or something like that. There's sort of other ways to work within that. And that's been a really critical part of how we train and our mindset around creating accessibility and inclusivity in the outdoors.
I never thought of that. I mean, again, I think that organizations like yours, the importance of making sure that everybody understands that nature is not just for the quote unquote able-bodied. Everybody's able-bodied, right? I never thought about how that also must make a community feel if, it's all, you always have to adapt the environment to that specific group. Whereas understanding that, look, you're not just limited to the places like that, which is important to have the ADA legislation there for make sure that businesses are inclusive of every client, everybody that they've got. But I never thought about the fact that you don't have to adapt the environment. You can equip the individual, and that way everything is accessible, not just, again, these certain places.
Yeah, absolutely. Nature can be an equalizer in that way of not everyone is competent and able in the outdoors for lots of different reasons. It takes me a long time to remember how to tie my knots every time I'm on a camping trip. And when I go with people who know how to do knots better, I'm like, can you do this knot? Because you're not going to do it better than me. And I'll go ahead and portage our canoe. Let's just split up. There's so many parts of being in the outdoors and skills that come out of that. When you bring a group of people together with totally differing abilities and skill sets and knowledges and identities, what we find is an opportunity for everyone to shine in different places and support each other throughout the creation of community within that trip. I think what I love seeing is more and more media, more and more promotion, more and more magazines that don't just have a, stereotypical thin, slender, bearded white man in a flannel as always the representative of the outdoors. There's more and more that we are actually seeing representation, which is authentic to reality. And I think that is a really important piece also.
I think for those who are not the straight white men, and in this case, bearded with their flannel, on, and their coffees, because they always have a coffee with them. But I think that they may not understand about representation matters. And we hear that in different communities, but it is important because there's a lot of personalities that are not aggressive. They're not the ones who are adventurous initially. They're not the ones that necessarily may lead the pack. There's so many people, and you have to have leaders and followers. And there's so many followers who are like, I don't want to be the first out there. I need to see something first before I'm comfortable enough to make that action or take that action to participate. And so to your point, yes, I mean, it's getting better. It's certainly not there because if you are, again, with the Paralympics, not to overexpose that as being what it's about to have disabilities. But I think that for my group, I saw a lot of people inspired by that. It's like they it wasn't top of mind if they didn't have a family member or a loved one who has a disability. And then they saw it and they were inspired. And then, that inspiration kind of wanes back to normal life because television shows, like you said, magazine covers, like anything that deals with disabilities or being out in nature usually does not include someone in a wheelchair, someone with braces. Like it usually doesn't do that. And my favorite image on your website at wildernessinquiry.org is the man in the wheelchair rock climbing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and it's like, oh, I've never thought about that, but yes, it's possible. And for those who are in a wheelchair, who may not think that that's a possibility, if you see it, then you realize, oh, wait, this is a reality that I can do.
That's exactly right. I think that idea of representation matters is so critical, and I do love that we are sort of seeing a lot more of that in beyond just what Wilderness Inquiry is doing. And I think you make such a great point too about that the exposure, and we operate within a structure called what we call the pyramid of outdoor engagement. So we have these different programs that offer different levels of intensity on a trip. So we've got day programs where people are coming out often in the big north canoes with 20 other people for a paddle down the waterway or river closest to where they live. I'm currently in St. Paul, Minnesota. We're right on the Mississippi River. Tomorrow I'm going to go out with a group and we'll paddle down the Mississippi River for 4 hours, and everyone will go home, get back on the bus and go home and have a lovely day. And that's a spark. It's one of the ways to say, all right, let's demystify, let's take some of the fear, anxiety, or unknown out of water, out of paddle sport, out of just being in urban, but still wilderness. And then what happens after that? If you liked it, if it created that little spark, then there's an opportunity to go on a camping trip. We call them near nature camping trips. So somewhere within an hour or two of where you live, a state park, a county park, a city park that allows camping, lots of places where there's amenities, running water, but you are sleeping in a tent, and it's for a night or two. And then from there, there's an opportunity to come on what we call an extended adventure. So something that's 3 or 4 or 5 nights long, could be in a national park like Yellowstone or up in the Boundary Waters. And that is just, it's a further engagement and a deeper engagement in the outdoors. And people can plug in at any, participants at Wilderness Inquiry can plug in at any level of that outdoor pyramid of outdoor engagement. But what's important is having the option to be able to identify, where are you? What's your comfort level? And where's the place that we can support you best? And then give that opportunity so that the next thing can happen. And if they've felt really excited about it, there's an opportunity to keep going and to do more.
There are so many trips, though. I mean, you mentioned where you are, you gave some examples, but you organize trips around the world, right?
Yeah. Yes, we sure do.
I mean, so I want to go to New Zealand. I want to go to Patagonia. I want to go to Iceland. So again, it's these possibilities that for those who feel somewhat disenfranchised, I'm not saying that everybody does, but a lot of times I know that there's that 1 or 2 individuals who just are, not in a good place, right, mentally, because of whatever's going on. And I think that if you realize, hey, look, Wilderness Inquiry will take you to Iceland. You can go to Belize. You can go to Utah. I mean, there's so much to do that you hear other people potentially doing, maybe not an outdoor adventure, but still, I think that it's just important to understand accessibility, inclusivity, and the fact that, Meg, you and your team make sure that everybody feels like, hey, you're capable of doing this, and we're going to show you how.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what it's all about. And it's about that communication. It's about asking questions. It's about creating trust and finding that space within the planning process and then on the trip itself, where there's an opportunity to just say, here's what I need. And that's healthy for all of us. It's healthy for all of us to say, this is where my vulnerability is showing up. This is where my strength is showing up. This is where my learning edge is showing up. And we get there faster, in my experience. We get there faster experiences where there's some newness for everybody. And a trip to New Zealand, yeah, there's a lot of newness there for everybody. A trip up to the Boundary Waters, same thing. So the kind of environment of a camping adventure or of an outdoor adjacent adventure really is conducive to that kind of community building that happens within those groups. And then a lot of learning also from everybody and for everybody.
So, Meg, before I let you go, tell us how people can get involved with Wilderness Inquiry. And also, I want to hear from you, because you do this for a living and you do this every day, why nature is so important for people to really take advantage of and the healing properties of it.
Absolutely. Well, we have our 2025 trips are live on our website. It is www.wildernessinquiry.org, and you can find a trip or find an itinerary. And we are always happy to receive inquiries about, I'd like to go here, or how accessible is this trip, and would you consider going here? All of that. We love interacting. So please reach out. And I think there is mounting evidence that the healing, the wellness, the health benefits of time spent outdoors. We see that with the youth that we work with. We see it in the evaluations of the kind of social, emotional growth that can come from trying something new that feels risky or scary in some way and feeling supported through that experience and coming out the other side. That's a critical piece of human development that we don't always attend to as adults. And Wilderness Inquiry provides an opportunity to slow down, to touch base, and to learn a lot about yourself and about other people in beautiful settings, beautiful nature settings. I can't speak highly enough about time spent in nature. Even a half a day, even 10 minutes can certainly make a difference, and let alone 5 or 6 days out in the wilderness. Although I have family members who will hear this and go, "No, Meg, not for me." And that's okay too.
I've got friends who swear that they never want to go camping, never want to do any of this stuff, but it's almost like, but there's a reason. I think as human beings, we're drawn to nature for a reason. We're part of nature, right? And there's a reason why you want to go out on the back deck for a second. There's a reason you want to go sit out on the front stoop, or you want to go take a walk, or you want to be outside. And the friends that I have that don't want to go camping are those people who love to take walks and to be outside. So it's like, well, if you had a bad camping experience when we're talking about equipment and putting it up and setting it up, and your dad made you do this, and whatever, it's like, that's not nature, right? Nature is something completely different, and you can reintroduce yourself to that, because that's what I think is just, a family trip where as a kid, you don't appreciate what you're doing. And then when you're an adult, like, oh, I wish I could go camping again like that, or not. Yes. For my friend.
Oh, I love that. I love the, like, let's move away from that. There is a hierarchy in outdoor experiences. Right. Summiting a 14er in Colorado is remarkable and amazing. But going out on a walk in your neighborhood and noticing the trees and spending time outside, the benefits of that are the same. And so yes. I love the idea of just saying that we don't need to have a hierarchy or huge goals attached to outdoor engagement. It's being outside that is the journey and the destination of that. Any time spent outside can be so beneficial to us.
Well, and I think too, Meg, I am a mother of a young son, and it's one of those things where you have to me, kind of look at youth, look at animals and nature, and just kind of remember who you are, because I think that the older we get, the more curmudgeon we might become. Mm-hmm. And when it rains, the first thing he wants to do is go out and run in the rain. Right. I remember as a kid going out in the front yard and just laying in the grass just to look up at the clouds. And it's like, when is the last time as an adult have I ever just said, you know what, I'm going to lay down and look at the clouds? No. And it's like, well, why not? And so again, those things, because it was, like you said, healing, relaxing. It's just kind of resetting yourself. And I think that sometimes as adults, we forget to plug back into what, our natural state is, which is to be outside and to be part of everything. And so I appreciate the fact that you and your team make sure everybody gets a chance to be outside and do things. And if they want to be adventurous outside, they get a chance to do it, as opposed to just leaving that for everybody else and leaving them behind. What is the most inspirational story you have with your job?
I don't know that I have a singular example, but I think what inspires me about this work and about the compassion and talent and skill of our outdoor staff team and the differences of our participants is that there's often something for everybody. And I think that's so important for us all to see, that we've got trips where there will be people who are deaf or deafblind, who use a wheelchair, who have, a neurodiverse brain, all of those different types coming together on a singular trip. And that creates an opportunity for the same thing that would happen on a trip with a different population of people. That sort of neutralizing or equalizing aspect of nature is is just such a really critical part of what we do. And I'm sorry I can't think of one single example, but it just feels like the kind of the when people come together in the outdoors of different abilities, it can be so inspiring and heartening and energizing in that way.
Well, Meg, thank you so much for being part of the podcast, and best of luck on your future journeys.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Wilderness Inquiry hosts trips around the world, and not only for those with disabilities, also the LGBT plus community, the neurodiverse community, the Black, Indigenous, and person of color community, and women. To find out more, go to wildernessinquiry.org.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Your Place on the River, brought to you by Carriage Kia of Woodstock, Georgia, in partnership with Chattahoochee Nature Center. Remember to like and subscribe to Your Place on the River wherever you get your podcast. Visit chatnaturecenter.org to stay updated on all happenings at the Nature Center.